Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everybody here on Fireside. I am the Crash Test Dummy. I'm Kurt Austin Live. We are here talking about Bullitt, Bullitt Train, or Bullitt the movie, the Mustang versus the speeding train that is known as Brad Pitt's movie in the second week, just dominating the box office. Maybe not quite dominating. Top Gun Maverick, as we've talked about, has done quite a few great things. We are here right now talking about the movie Bullitt Train. We're talking about the movie Bullitt. We're talking about some of the stunts that happened in them. Why? Because I am the Crash Test Dummy. What I love to do is talk about safety. I'm in the safety world. Safety is boring, but it can be a little bit of fun. So what I like to do is I mix that up a little bit with a bit of movie stuff. So we talk about movies, we talk about safety, we talk about how we can have a little bit of fun doing both of those. And I like to compare them both. Today, what we're doing in this series is Crash Test Dummy in the movies, Bullitt to Bullitt. What do you think about that today? What do you think? Let's get my notes out here and see where we're going to go today. Today we are going to go with a 1968 classic, Bullitt, with Steve McQueen. Some interesting facts about that movie before we get going too fast is there are only 23 stunt credits. The coolest thing about that is 18 of them are uncredited. That basically means that they're not giving anybody credit for the movies. Actually, there's actually a good one, Kurt. There's actually a phenomenal, holy shoot, wow. There's a great quote that's actually coming by from the movie where actually they had said to Steve McQueen, when he was actually performing the stunt of the airliner going over top of the great 1968 Bullitt Mustang was, couldn't they have found a dummy? Steve McQueen's reply to them was, they did. So anyway, Steve McQueen in the reverse burnout, another one was actually, wow, we just lost somebody there. So basically, couldn't we have found a dummy? The answer was they did. And so Steve McQueen's legend keeps on going on as the toughest guy in Hollywood back at the time. So I distracted on that one. Anyway, so going back to 18 uncredited stunt performers, with the best one being the dummy himself, Steve McQueen. Why are we thinking about that one so much? Because we had a Crash Test Dummy. I had no idea that this quote was actually accredited to Steve McQueen, but I love researching the movie, and that's what I found in that movie. So, going back to what's happening in the movie as well is the burnout scene. Going to the burnout scene next, there's a reverse burnout that was actually done in the movie, and it was actually an accident by Steve McQueen when he goosed the gas pedal too much, and he went a little bit too hard on that particular movie. So what happens when you go too hard? Well, things get goosed. So he actually did a burnout on that one, and it worked out so well that they actually kept it in the movie. Another great thing about the film debut of Suzanne Summers of Suzanne Summers. It's actually a bit of a few scenes. She was put there for a reason of uncredited format. She was just actually trying to cut her teeth. And an awful lot of people trying to break into the industry back then in the 60s were just basically extras. So she was an extra, but actually had a bit more of a scene. So I guess she would be considered a front extra. I'm not too sure, but there is a credit in there as the film debut of Suzanne Summers, which I thought was pretty cool because I always thought it was American Graffiti. Before that, I was wrong. So good for that little bit of research. That was pretty cool. Another good thing I noticed in researching this movie as well was the usage of product placement. This is another cool thing I found out. Completely irrelevant to Crash Test Dummy, but I really thought it was cool. Is the amount of product placement with Swanson and Jiffy Pops. I could never understand why there were so many Jiffy Pop ads around some of these older movies and what was going on. And it became a real thing to see a Crash Test Dummy or somebody in some sort of auto mechanics outfit or coveralls with Jiffy Pop or Swanson TV dinners. I could never understand it, and that was actually kind of neat. A little bit of the product placement that I didn't know about in the 60s. All those great nostalgic type of artworks that we like to collect and was popular for a while. Don't know if it still is. Someone else could tell me if it is or not. But those are pretty cool, and I guess that's what that was. Product placement in the 60s. Cool to know, good to learn. But going back to the topic, which is Crash Test Dummy, and Steve McQueen himself called himself the Dummy, which I thought was a classic. Steve McQueen, that was amazing. Don't know enough about him. I would love to, if anybody would come into the stage or talk, I would talk about Steve McQueen because I think it's pretty cool. So, anybody knows more about Bullitt, please, by all means, jump in here. So, what else do we know about Bullitt? Well, it was the scene for the great Bud Ekins, Danny Arnold. Hi Lily, how are you? We absolutely love Bud Ekins and Denny Arnold. These are a couple of classic drivers that created the famous scenes for Steve McQueen in Bullitt. So they're actually switching back and forth on who the drivers were going to be. And so many of these scenes were uncredited. You could actually tell when Steve McQueen was driving and when he wasn't by the placement of his face in the mirror. So they had all these ways to actually get around scenery at that point because they didn't have the great cameras and safety that they do now. So most of these scenes are uncredited because they didn't know who was going to be driving the car at the time. So that was a cool thing about about Steve McQueen and Bullitt. And just for you, Lily, letting you know that Steve McQueen, I think, is the coolest crash test dummy, because in researching this podcast, I found that there was a line where he was credited by a reporter, couldn't they have found a dummy to drive the car? And his response to them was, they did, in reference to himself as a driver of the car. So there's a ton of that. Again, going back to the thanks, going back to the uncredited movie scene. So the next part of that was, how does that compare to the movie Bullitt Train? Well, you're looking at Brad Pitt versus Steve McQueen. I'm not too sure how I rate on that one, but they're both pretty damn cool classic actors with that rugged look everyone is looking for. And I'm wondering myself, could Bullitt Train be Brad Pitt's Bullitt? We got to wonder about that one, because he's on a train. It's absolutely phenomenal action scenes. He does an awful lot of the scenes himself, not quite like what he did on Jimmy Fallon, where he's kind of riding a bicycle or not, but actually did an awful lot of the stunts closely. He worked for a very long time with close combat trainers. They do an awful lot of work. The amount of work in the stunts are phenomenal, what they're doing nowadays. So he actually was putting himself at the scene of 82 credited stunts for that movie. So with all the hand-to-hand combat, we actually have him with his stunt doubles. We have his stunt doubles also in with his stunt doubles. So I'm kind of like going back to the movie Thor. We actually have a stunt double depending on what type of scene they have. Brad Pitt also has a stunt double for his stunt double, depending on what they are close hand-to-hand combat, or whether they're actually going to be aerialists or some sort of necessary special need for the stunt. When you have to worry about, like, an aerialist would have a certain feature, they'd have the same thing for a stunt. So it's kind of like a stand-in in the movie scene. They actually just grow to a larger audience because they'd like to keep the specialists safe as well. So then going back to the movies, how do they keep safe? Well, it's a little bit different in Bullitt, the movie, the original, because they basically put in roll cages, hard hats, helmets, whatever they could find to pad stuff, make the vehicle as light as possible, and reinforced every way possible, using some sort of weight system. Ropes, pulleys, all that type of heavy-duty hard stuff. And for the flips, they would just basically counterweight and balances. Not that indifferent to what they're doing in the older Robin Hood movies, where they're using weights and balances to make Robin Hood fly through the air. Same type of system, just a little bit faster, a little bit harder, a little bit bigger boom and crash. None of the physics really change. You'd have to ask a specialist in that, but it's the same concept. Same now going to Brad Pitt in Bullitt Train. What did they do there? An awful lot of phenomenal close action, Jackie Chan style action, hand-to-hand combat. You want to get in tight, you want to get in close, and they're actually feeling that. So you're feeling rushed, you're feeling like everything is to be used that is near you. It's actually not indifferent to some sort of factory where everything around you is some sort of hazard. So when you're in a car crash, or whether you're in a train, everything around you could be good or bad. Kind of like a pen. A pen could be dangerous, or a book could be different. Or in the case of Bullitt Train, it looks like briefcases were good, as well as serving trays. Those are a couple of my favorite ones. I'm only seeing it on some of the clips here, but my goodness, it's been phenomenal what I've been trying to get at. Love to get away from work to see the whole thing through instead of bits and pieces here and there, but that's my take so far on Bullitt. Probably my third time talking about Bullitt and Bullitt Train. I love the movies. Love doing it with that. Love about talking about safety, because that's what we do here on Crash Test Dummy. We talk about safety. We talk about safety in movies. We do that for about 15 to 20 minutes until I start running out of breath, or someone jumps up and says, this is a great movie. What do you think about that? Because right now, I'm basically putting it out to anyone in the world. Brad Pitt versus Steve McQueen, Bullitt to Bullitt Train. What do you think? We should start a poll on that one. So yeah, it would be definitely hot. I tell you, I'm going to have to bring in some other people on that one. We're going to look for a poll on that one. So this is the first series of Bullitt to Bullitt. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a deep dive next week on what type of machinery goes into the crashes, what type of scenes had to be prepared for, and if the actors actually prepped for it. So there's a little bit of background. There's a tremendous amount of trivia on Bullitt, the actual movie. I'm going to grab a couple of right now, which I believe I got most of them already. The film debut of Suzanne Summers was the biggest one that I liked, as well as the action scenes, the car chases, and what they were doing in San Francisco at the time. They're actually having to book that hill. There are so many hill scenes being shot in San Francisco in the 60s, and there's so much activity because of the love and hippie movement at the time. It was actually quite dangerous, but it was actually such an attractive area. You can see an awful lot of what's going on in the background, all the way going back to the scenes of the airline scene. I was mentioning the airliner over the car where Steve McQueen was doing the driving. There was actually an awful lot happening right then around the wars and who was taking over who in the airline industry. There's an awful lot going on there, but you can see that they're really trying to showcase the city and show it off as a great powerhouse of what was going on in the world, because there was such a plethora of art. So it's a really cool area to have someone as good looking and as set and cool as Steve McQueen in an area that was full of really young, happening people. So that was a kind of a neat thing about the movie Bullitt. Conversely, you jump over to Bullet Train. Again, a bit older probably than Steve McQueen on that particular movie, but what a following with that same classic, good-looking, cool guy who can still do his stunts. You're getting to see an awful lot of that in today's movie scenes, that the actors that can actually do their own stunts. Tom Cruise still doing them. You're getting Keanu Reeves still getting back into that. It's incredible at his age. We're looking at what's going on with this movie with Brad Pitt. And we wonder to ourselves, why can they keep doing it at their age when Steve McQueen really couldn't? Well, again, it comes back to protection. We keep our actors healthy, we keep them safe because really to them, this is their job. This is their workplace. They love to talk about suffering for their art, but they don't need to. We could have these actors doing better, cooler things longer if we just took care of themselves. And the reason is, well, we have better equipment now. We know how to put them in a roll cage. We know how not to do it. We know how to have a better safety harness so we're not flipping them around in circles with just a rope around their waist. Little things like that, which actually add to the performance of the actor, so we can actually get better movies by protecting them better. So that's kind of my final thought on how we can keep awesome looking, cool guys like Brad Pitt sticking around, being as cool as they are forever, just kind of like Keanu Reeves. So that's kind of what we're talking about this week on Crash Test Dummy. About 20 minutes every Monday night, 7:40 p.m. Love to talk about movies, love to talk about safety. I'm Kurt Austin Live, the Crash Test Dummy. Have yourself a fantastic night, everyone, and we'll see you next week.